Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carla Fuller. I'm one of the high school educational consultants here at HSLDA, and I'm excited today to be joined by Dr. Lyle Lee Jenkins. You can explain a little bit more about that in just a bit. He's an author, a speaker, an educator with years of experience in education, and we're going to be talking about how to keep the love of learning from early years into the next generation. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for joining me today.
Thank you, Carla. It is a treat to be with you and all of the people that are listening on, because it's crucial. It is so important that
Absolutely.
love of learning that children were given at birth, it
Right.
was still there when they entered kindergarten,
Hmm.
and less than 10% still have that love of learning when they finish high school or drop out, whichever one.
Yeah. I want to talk about that in a second. That's what we're going to be talking about. Dr. Jenkins is going to be sharing some really helpful tips with us from his book called How to Create a Perfect Homeschool. We'll talk a lot about that and some of your other ideas. We'd love to have you join us and join in on the conversation. You can let us know the grades you're homeschooling, let us know a little bit about where you're from. Just drop those into the comment section, and we'll try our best to get to some of your questions today. Let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Dr. Jenkins, and what it was that inspired you to write this book?
Okay. Um, if you looked at my resume, there are hundreds of people with the same resume. I was
Hmm.
a teacher, a principal, a school
Hmm.
superintendent. Okay,
Right.
I've done that. That's not what makes what I have to say unique and helpful. I
Hmm.
did learn from
Okay.
that, of course, but
Hmm.
it was teachers and others who just dramatically changed the way I thought about things and helped me answer
Hmm.
questions. The
Hmm.
first person, she had 400 visitors a year to watch her teach. She was teaching first grade. And
Hmm.
I knew that my students in fifth grade were not doing near what her first graders were doing. And that impacted and went on. It was others. It was in the teaching of reading and writing. Another teacher who had 500 visitors a year. It's hard to believe. My two sons were in that room for a while. And the dinner
Hmm.
table, they say, "Dad, we didn't have a visitor today."
Hmm.
That was the news because so many people wanted to see it. And I learned and learned and learned, and there's others. But
Okay.
all of them were with how do we increase the skill,
Hmm.
raise the expectations, and at the same time, keep that love of learning alive all the way through at least high school.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. You mentioned some very sobering facts in the beginning of your book, pictured in the Jenkins Curve. Can you give us some information about that?
Yes, I surveyed 3,000 teachers in
Mhm.
workshops at various states. And I asked uh, a number of questions, but one was, what grade level do you teach?
Mhm.
And what percent of your kids love school? Well, kindergarten teachers on the average said 95% of their kids love school.
Right.
In first grade, it's 90%. In second grade, it's 82%. It goes down
Mm.
and down and down every year.
Much younger than
So,
you would expect.
yes, I,
Mhm.
as a person who was former an elementary person, I assumed incorrectly that schools kept enthusiasm high in elementary school and it was lost
Yeah.
in middle school and high school. It's not true. It's just that we
Mhm.
notice it more then,
Right.
but it starts early. And I didn't ask if they loved learning. I just asked if they loved school. The
Mhm.
lowest,
Mhm.
59% in grade 9. So when you go
Right.
further and say, well, how many of you in this audience of 50 people loved learning when you were a junior and senior in high school as much as you did in kindergarten? I always
Right.
get between 5 and 8%.
Mhm. And so by the time they get to high school, it's very, very low. That
Yes.
that yes, exactly. I wonder if you would have the same numbers with homeschoolers? I would think that probably across the board, there's some of that that exists as well in the homeschool community. So those of you who are listening, you can join us and let us know about your students, let us know about your school. What do you experience with your children regarding their love of learning? Are they still enthusiastic as they go through the grades, or does that begin to wane a little to the point that it's concerning you and it's affecting, motivation and affecting your school? So yeah, you can join us and let us know more about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Carla. I assume, I don't know for sure, that it's higher in the homeschool environment. However, I do know from talking to many homeschool parents in 5 or 6 different states that some of the things that are causing kids to not like the classroom, whether it's public or private, seep into the homeschool. For
Right.
example, John Hattie is an educator out of Melbourne, Australia, has compiled the research on 250 things we do to children that impact their learning.
Right.
I think you're nodding your head. You know that, Carla. You know.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay?
Right.
He's only found 4 things that make learning go backwards. That means they know more. They know less at the end of the school year than they did at the beginning of the school year. Found 4.
Right.
One is retention. When you flunk a kid, they're so discouraged by that. They know less at the end of the second year in the same grade than they did at the end of the first year in that grade.
Right.
But
Right.
that doesn't impact homeschool. Impact homeschool is bribery. We don't call it bribery. We're more polite. We call it incentives.
Right.
It's a bribe.
If you get this done, then we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we give you boring work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday so you can have fun on Friday. No.
Right.
The work has to give the thrill. And John Hattie gives us another, it's easy to remember. They're triplets. They rhyme. Skill, will, and thrill.
Right. Right. Yes.
Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course we want the skill. Of course. But if there's no thrill from the learning, then they don't work hard, which means they lose the will to work hard. So if there's no thrill and no will, we don't get the skill we want.
Exactly. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit more about that? I think that there's no shortage of curriculum options for homeschool parents. There's no shortage of how-to books. One of the things that makes your book really unique is the added voice of the homeschool mom and Kelly. I'm missing her name here, but Kelly. I'm sorry, Kelly.
Kelly
And
Hawkinson Lippert, and she may even be
exactly.
listening. I don't know. She could be
Exactly,
listening.
yes. And
Yeah.
if so, I apologize for butchering your name. But it's unique in that you outline some strategies and some tips, which we'll talk about. And then she lends her voice by helping the readers see how it worked in her school. And I think that's really important.
Kelly has 3 wonderful children. The youngest is starting kindergarten this year in her homeschool, one in grade 2 and one in grade 4. And so in writing the book, I wrote the how-to.
Right.
And she wrote what happened.
Exactly. Right.
And her writing is in italics. It jumps out at you. It's her what happened that makes it powerful. That's what makes it powerful, because there's a lot of do this, do that. But okay, and then you might say, well, since I spent most of my life in schools with classrooms, what does Lee know? Okay. Well, to make it authentic, first of all, I spent a lot of time she lives a mile away. She and her husband live a mile away from my house. Okay. So we spent time together with her family. But the most important thing is I would come and I would share something, but then when I'm gone, and they don't have to be so polite to the guest, what is it that really happened in the home? And that's what she writes. And she knows the real world, can tell you exactly how it happens. So
and she's an educator herself, correct?
She
Excuse me
taught
for
4
interrupting.
years in the public schools.
That's right.
I told her when she started homeschool, it's going to be harder for you than others. The reason it's going to be harder for you it's because you taught in the school system, you have more to unlearn. And
That's right.
and we know that unlearning is harder than learning.
That's right.
So there's some homeschool people listening right now who
That's right.
have a treasure jar. They've been bribing their kids to get the work done, and they have to unlearn. How do I organize my classroom without bribing them to do the work?
That's
That's
right.
hard because you have to
It's
unlearn,
It's
right?
very difficult. It is, yes, very difficult. Yeah, we did have someone who left us a comment. She has twin 11th graders, and they still love learning, which is wonderful. She's a homeschool mom, and she says that one of the reasons is we like to keep them involved in educational choices and follow a path that matches their interests, skill sets, and plans for the future. And I think you would agree that that's key, correct?
Exactly. I mean, we start off in early grades with what word would you like to learn to read today?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's no program you need to have that. It's described in the
Right.
book. It's
Right.
a choice.
Exactly.
It's a choice. Okay.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, in history, in the chapter on history, there's what history do you want to study? It can be biblical.
mhm,
It can be from society at large. It doesn't matter. But
mhm,
we have a timeline that we built. It's in an accordion book, and we're going to
mhm.
record what you learned in that accordion book in the century what occurred. So you're
Right,
getting a sense of history, but you don't have to study it all in the chronological order in order to learn it.
exactly.
So it's
Yes,
all about keeping that love of learning.
right. That's the
Then
thrill that you talk about.
mhm, the thrill also comes from how we keep the data.
Mhm,
Um, it's the same way in classrooms as in the homeschool curriculum that I see. Let's take you're beginning to learn adult sight words in first grade,
mhm, mhm.
and what the program you bought says to teach them these 10 words. When they read all the 10 words perfectly, they can go to the next list of 10. When they
Right.
read the next 10 words perfectly, they go to the next list. No, it's very discouraging for them. So what
Mhm.
do? We give them the bucket of everything. They're going all the words for the year in a bucket. And
Right.
each week we draw out 10 at random.
That's
Say,
right.
find the ones you can read and read them. I've got a graph that I have on my phone. And it's of Kelly's younger son when he was in kindergarten. The first week he read 0. The next week, and she put all those 10 back in the bucket. Next week, pulled out 10. The next week, he read one of them. Third
Right.
week, he read 0. But by the time they got to week 15 or 16, didn't matter which 10 you pulled out, he could read all of them. But he didn't get discouraged along the way, could see his growth along the way. It's a picture. I'm getting better and better and better. And guess what? I was in North Carolina talking to a teacher who taught seniors.
Mhm.
Said I've been teaching what you taught for 10 years, and my high school seniors love it. Has nothing
That's
to do
yeah.
with age. Everybody likes seeing that they're making growth.
Mhm.
Everybody.
Yeah. 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 We have someone else who just let us know that their son is a 6th grader, and he's got special needs and loves learning now that he's homeschooling. She says, I love that I can adapt his work as we go and throw out what doesn't work. And I know that that's something that resonates very deeply with you. You were talking about one of the things I really like about your book is that it outlines strategies, and then we hear Kelly's perspective about how the various strategies worked in her home, and we can get a little more specific about that. But you also provide charts, and I don't think they can see charts and other things, and a website that they can go to so they can print those things out and make use of them in their homeschool. That's another feature, Dr. Jenkins, that's I think very unique about your book than some of the other how-tos that are out there available for homeschool families. I think that that's a really important thing that you've added
Yes.
aspect that you've added to your
When
work.
you go to LTOJ, 4 letters, LTOJ.net, and you
Hmm.
scroll down, it's blank graphs. They're free,
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
kids graph their work, like just as we described in the book. It shows that information, describes how it works. But then to
Hmm.
make the graphs up, I mean that's a pain, and you can download them. It's free.
Yeah, right. Right.
Download them and use them.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's one. You know, one of the things I wanted to circle back and say, if you were to ask any homeschooler on any given day to describe their school, perfect is probably not a term, not a word that that they would use if you ask them to describe it in one word. Can you tell us a little bit more? I noticed you said though this one article is very important. You didn't say how to create the perfect homeschool, but a perfect. How do you
Okay.
define perfect, and how do you make
Okay.
that doable for
Okay.
families?
Let me tell you why I chose that word, because
Hmm.
it's not going to be perfect.
Right,
Okay. So
right.
why did I choose that word? It was from studying the success of Toyota Corporation.
Mhm.
And they
Yeah.
always started their planning with what would perfect be.
Uh,
Then they say, we'll never be perfect.
mhm,
Then they say, well, but where are we now?
mhm, mhm.
And then they said, well, what could we do to get us closer? So, so then what would perfect be in education? For me, perfect would be that and we talked about it earlier, the love of learning children were born with and brought to kindergarten is still
Mhm.
there at 17. So the
That's
first
right.
person who wrote in has created a perfect school because
Yes,
that love
she
of learning
has.
is there. Because if they love to learn at age 17, they're going to do well. They don't have to
Mhm.
retrace and try to work it out. But
Exactly.
yeah, let me also say, not everybody's going to write that same note.
You're right.
Some
Yeah.
people are going to say, "I'm struggling. I have a kid
Yeah.
that doesn't want to do it. It's homeschool. Every day when I say it's time for school, they groan." Right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
what do you
true.
do? Stop motivating them.
Mm.
Say to them, "Okay, I know you don't like it. Um, I want to. You loved it in kindergarten.
Mhm.
So my job as the homeschool parent is to put you back the way you used to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not going to try to fix you. You were already
Right.
fixed when you were born. You're already fixed in kindergarten. I'm going to do my
Mhm.
best to put you back. So you and
Mhm.
I will talk, and I'm going to listen to you. What is it you're most interested in? What do you
Right.
like? What do you
Right.
don't like? And we're going to put you back the way you used to be.
Yeah.
And we can
Yeah.
do it. And
Yeah.
that's a healthy statement to a kid. I don't have to fix
Yeah.
you. You were born fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and in the book is because of John Hattie's skill, will, and thrill. There's a chart for measuring will and thrill.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. So it's a chart there for measuring will and thrill. And
Yeah.
then you can track it and know how you're doing. They'll tell you.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you to define those a little bit further for us. But first, I want to. Melissa has joined us from Pennsylvania. Her youngest child is in first grade, so this is a wonderful time, Melissa, for you to join and think about how to create the love of learning, how to cultivate that in your homeschool, and how to keep that going. Kimberly has joined us from Tennessee, and she has an 11th grader. Kimberly, I don't know if your 11th grader is still loving school or if you're getting a little bit of resistance. But I think that the strategies that Dr. Jenkins, poses in his book would be really helpful. So one of the things, so many, as I mentioned, there are many curriculum options for parents, and one of the things I've noticed is that they either drill on facts and testing, the skill aspect of things, or they emphasize the thrill and the love of learning, but it may be light on teaching skill. What is it that distinguishes your methods, your strategies, and why do you think you need all three: will, skill, and thrill?
It's interesting because people do swing, from just having thrill
Hmm.
or having high skill and the thrill. And
Hmm.
the thrill has to come from the learning. So,
Right.
and it also comes from the graphing.
Okay.
When Kelly writes in the book that when she was doing the adult sight words and her son read nine of the nine words and didn't get to go to the next list. Next week he read nine again. And the next week nine again. He said, I don't want that anymore. I hate reading.
Mm.
See? But
Right.
she changed. And so then when you get five right, great. Let's see if we can get six.
Right.
Wow, you got six. That's the best you've ever done. I'm so
Yeah.
proud of you. That goes all the way through algebra. It'll go through
Hmm.
anything you're learning. Tell them, and this is the hard part, but if you bought a curriculum, the most important part of that curriculum is probably the table of contents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The rest of the book is a method that may or may not match your child. But the table of
Absolutely.
contents says, this is, look at that and say, this is what we're going to learn this year. Write it down.
Yeah.
I have it for math fluency, and math standards are in production. All the way
Mm-hmm.
through Algebra 2, they'll be there. But it's
Oh,
this is
good.
what you're going to learn this year.
Right. Yeah.
Then we're going to quiz you each week on a random sample of that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you're going
You're
to see your
starting with the
growth.
end in mind. Yeah, that's
Yes.
right.
We always hear that. Start with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Since we always hear that. But
Mm-hmm.
then we don't do it.
Right.
The end of the mind mean is finishing this book. No, 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 no. The end of the mind is, what do you want me to know? And the adult needs to write it down. Here's
Right.
another thing. Children are not able to distinguish between trivia and essential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you take chapter tests or something, somebody's curriculum's test, sometimes there's trivia in there and sometimes there's essential. And the kids get discouraged because they don't remember the trivia. Give
Yeah.
them only what is important for them to remember for life. Don't put down
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
Just, and you can teach nonsense because I'm just really interesting. It's fun, but you're not
Right.
accountable to remember it.
Yeah.
Write down
Yeah.
the essential for the year.
It seems very efficient. It's a very efficient way of teaching and learning. We have had a couple other people join us. Kimberly did, she did answer and said that they have good days, they have challenging days. Bobby has joined us from Utah with 7 children, the oldest being 16 and taking college courses, college classes. And so I think, that's wonderful. Yeah. So can you explain a little bit more about how a parent would implement these things across the different areas of the curriculum? So we know that all learning and pretty much every area of human endeavor involves skill with words and with numbers. So how do you do that with math and science, and then the liberal arts, and also with history? How would a parent involve their children and keep that will, skill, and thrill going across the curriculum?
Well, I've listed 6 areas where dead end streets where kids give up.
Hmm.
So if you were to go to Lyle Lee Jenkins on Amazon, you'd see 35 books there.
Hmm. Yes.
And there's more coming. But the basic how to create a perfect homeschool is there. But then
Hmm.
there's some dead ends, some things that cause kids to give up.
Hmm.
One is, and talking to the first grade parent there, they don't learn to read in first or second grade, and then they say, I can't read. And the parent says, yes, you
Hmm.
can. The kid says, no, I
Hmm.
can't. The kid wins because the parent can't convince them they can. So what do we
And they
do to that?
resist.
They
Hmm.
resist.
Hmm.
Schools get applauded in the newspapers if 90% of their kids learn to read. Then I say, well, if you went to the airport and they said this plane arrived safely 90% of the time, would you get on?
Mm.
No, you wouldn't
No,
do it,
I would
right?
not. No.
No. So 90%, they all need to. So what do we do? And that's a part of what we do. And some of the most exciting things we're working on are wordless books for young authors.
Mm.
And they're good from ages 3 to 9. There's no words. The kids
Hmm.
write the words.
Hmm.
And so
So
for the young children, they can read it because they wrote it.
well, and another thing that especially for some of our viewers who have younger children and maybe older children as well, you encourage narration, right? So they may draw pictures or there's artwork, and this is true across the curriculum, maybe except for math. I think that's not the case for math. Um, and then you have them talk about what they've their artwork. So it builds so many skills in different areas, but you're still, yeah, focusing on the subject area.
At any age, including high
Hmm.
school, you can say, if you got the family with 8 kids, okay? Some of you think like a writer
Hmm.
first, and some of you think like an artist first.
Hmm. Hmm.
In the same family, you'll have that. So if
Right.
you're the kid that thinks in art first, then before you write your story, do the art,
Hmm.
illustrate
Hmm.
it. Then we'll write it.
Hmm.
If you're the writer, write your story, and then we can illustrate it. but the kids who are the artists are frustrated when it's time to write and they don't know what to write about. Do the
Yeah,
art, and you reset.
exactly.
Then we do want all through the elementary grades to take dictation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, when they're 4 and 5 and 6, they do the art because most of the kids wanted more like art in the beginning. And you say, "Tell me about your story," and you write.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
write it down for them, and then you read it back. And I'd say one night a week, instead of reading a book from your home library, when they're going to bed, you read a story they wrote,
Yes.
so they know
Yes.
that what I write, other people can read. Okay?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's very, very helpful.
Now they're older and they're writing on their
Mm-hmm.
own, and they write the end. And you know they're not done with their story. Their hand got tired, right? So they write the end when no. You pick up the pencil and you say, let's erase the end. I know your hand got tired. Tell me, and let's keep going. And you take
Right.
dictation, and then after a while you say, is your hand tired? Is your hand okay now? Oh yeah, it is. Okay, here's the pencil back. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Dictation is powerful at any level where you can,
Mm-hmm.
when they're older, say, I can type faster than you can. Let's get this going. You just tell me, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll get this done.
Yeah.
Um, I want to also say something about it was so powerful for Kelly with her 3 children is editing that ties in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The schools have it wrong, and it goes one. We've all had the red pencil, the red pen.
Mm.
You get your
Yeah.
paper back with red all over it. No, it discourages people.
Right. Sure.
Then we went to the other extreme. The other extreme is, well, inventive spelling. Put it however you want. It'll be fine. No, it's
Mm-hmm.
not fine. Right?
Right.
So what do? Let them write in pencil. And if you've got the 8 kids, when they're through writing, they put it in a stack that's called the editing pile. And mom picks up the one on the top and says, come up here, and they get one-on-one time with mom or dad if dad's doing the teaching. Maybe when dad comes home, it helps with the editing. And we
Right.
sit there together and we erase and we get it right. You get the
Yeah.
period right, the punctuation right. The adult is erasing and getting it right in for them. They learn so much through editing. It's
Yeah.
invaluable. They don't need
Yeah.
a bunch of worksheets on. And Kelly will say, when I was teaching school, I had a worksheet on quotation marks. Then we had a worksheet on exclamation marks. Then we had a worksheet on commas, on multiple on commas. And then we had
Separate. Yeah.
no. Tell them in their story when they need it. That's a
That's
big
right.
part of keeping. And then they're happy with their story because it's all done right, and they can read it to grandma and grandpa, and everybody appreciates it
We
because it's
have
done right.
I'm sorry, we have 2 comments, one from Kimberly, and she says, dictation is an interesting method to use in assisting young writers. Bobby also really likes that idea. I tell you, when I read the book, that was one of the things that really jumped out at me as being something very effective. And again, you're keeping that motivation and that love of learning by involving them. They're not reading something that's remote from them. It's their own
Yes.
intellectual or creative property. Professor MJ says, any alternative writing tools to suggest for a child who is nonverbal but loves to write, but has poor eye coordination, which makes writing hard. What do you suggest?
Well, that's a hard one because I've talked about the child being verbal,
Right, right,
but
yeah.
they do have ways of communicating.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
if they can, whatever, and there's ways that people have with communicating that are nonverbal. And so when they do that, write it down and then read it back and say, is this what you meant?
Yes, yeah. There's
And
still
then they'll
ways to
nod
do
their head,
that.
yes or no, this is what I meant.
Or
Um,
point, there's some way to
Point to
indicate
it,
their
yes. Uh-huh.
intention. Yeah. Lisa, yes, Lisa, this will be recorded so that you can watch it later. We're here with Dr. Lee Jenkins. You told us in the beginning that you actually do prefer Lee Jenkins, and we're talking about how to foster the love of learning in your children. He's written a wonderful book. You started with how to create the perfect school, and now you've shifted to, in this particular work, how to create a perfect homeschool. where you outline a number of strategies that help parents keep their child's will to learn, keep that motivation high, help them build skill along the way, and just love learning and keep that love of learning going, as they go through their lives. One of the things as an educational consultant, as we are interacting with parents, we hear some recurring, themes from them, some barriers that they encounter as they're working with their children. Sometimes the barrier exists with the child. They're resistant, or we did a webinar on motivation that was very popular because parents are really struggling with that. But some of the barriers are with the parents themselves. They feel insecure. They don't have the confidence that they can do this. Sometimes there's financial constraints that prevent them from being able to purchase really expensive programs and curricula. Can you share a little bit about those barriers and how your strategies address those for homeschool parents?
Well, first, let's take the expense. Let's talk about that one. One of the reasons there's a teacher shortage in the country is that schools have bought $1 million programs that the teachers and children hate, but they have to use it because they spend so much money on it.
Right.
And the teachers say, I'm not doing that. And they're out of here. They go.
Mm-hmm.
So homeschool, same thing can happen in homeschool. You spend, even if you have the money, you spend on an expensive program. The kid hates it. What do? You're
Right.
tempted to bribe them to do it because you spent so much money.
Sure.
So anyway, don't. You'll make the same mistake that classrooms are making by forcing them to do something that you spend a lot of money on that's not working.
Right.
Now let's go beyond. In my books, we put in the back of the books a QR code.
Mm-hmm.
And that QR code is unique in the industry because all of the worksheets for children, you download them. They don't write in the book you buy. And Kelly will say, this is the least expensive items on the market because you don't buy new ones every year.
Right.
It's not a program with page day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. But let's take the book on base 10 blocks. It goes from adding all the way to square roots, cube roots, exponents. Okay. You download the worksheets and it can work for all 8 kids, one book. So we do want to think about expenses, and you don't always need those expensive things. And if you take How to Create a Perfect Homeschool, there's this, it's nervous because you don't have page 1, page 2, page 3.
Right.
But you have in your head where you're going.
Yeah. I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, it's know where you're going. Not be the teacher that doesn't know the whole curriculum. They teach chapter 1 and while the kids are doing that, they're reading chapter 2 to be 1 chapter ahead. Then the kids do chapter 2, then they read chapter 3 to be no. You could be that same failed person who doesn't know have the end in mind.
That's right. Yeah, one of the things that we encourage families to do is you don't want to be mastered by the curriculum. You want to master it. You want it to serve your needs and your family's needs. And I think to your other point, sometimes when there's multiple children in the family, you've bought something expensive, you do that, and many parents actually buy them with with the intention of using it with all of their children. But then you realize, oh my goodness, this is not working, but you feel like you have to, you're committed to it. We've bought it, we've purchased it, we're just going to use it. One of the things I think that's really useful about the strategies that you and Kelly talk about is that it can be you can have multiple children and still use these strategies. And it's particular to the child and how they're growing, how they're learning, and what their needs are. So you can have variable levels of needs and grades, and it's still applicable. And I think that's really wonderful. Yeah.
And yes, and when you have the end in mind, you get to involve the kid. Okay, here's the things we have to learn in 8th grade in our world history class. We're going to study world history for you this year. I want you to know these things by the end of the year. Which one do you want to learn first? Doesn't matter.
Yes.
What do you want to learn
That's right.
second? Okay, now when we get down to May, okay, you got 2 left that you've been avoiding. Okay, we got to do that. We don't have to do it in the sequence. One of the things I don't like about being an author is that pages are numbered.
Yes, they are. And
Okay.
chapters are numbered.
Yes. Okay. So why that? That's the way books are organized.
Right.
Does that mean you have to read it in that order? No. Does that mean you have to teach it in that order? No.
Hmm.
But books, most authors aren't writing the book in order per se. But when you get to
Hmm.
the end, you've got to number the pages and have a table of contents.
That's right. Yeah.
Don't teach it in the order. Ask your
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, I think that's, what it is, one of the things that I really love about what you're writing, it honors the children. It's so respectful of them and their process. It really does, it gives them a voice.
Yes.
You invite feedback. I think one of the things that you mentioned about, traditionally schooled students is, the ideal is for them to tell the teachers what they want to learn, that would be the ideal. And homeschool parents, I think, do have a little bit more ability, actually a lot more ability to do that, to
Yes.
have a say, to participate. And you invite their feedback, which also contributes to that will to learn. And I
Mhm.
think that's really helpful. One of the things that we've also noticed is some parents really like to have an actual program, a canned curriculum, if you will, because it gives them a sense of safety. For you, that the page numbering and chapter numbering might be a barrier, but for some parents who may not feel confident, they feel that it gives them safety. They feel like, okay, I'm covering all the bases. I'm teaching them everything that they need to learn if I follow this program, and so we're going to follow it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I would say because what I teach is much more child choice centered.
It
Okay.
really is, yeah.
Okay. It's not program centered.
Hmm.
So to jump into what I'm teaching with all of you want them to learn is going to be difficult.
Hmm.
So my advice is if you got a program and you're using it for one subject, for all the subjects except for one, look at what's in the How to Create a Perfect Homeschool for one subject and take
Hmm.
that and implement it.
That's
And
right.
when you've got it down pat, you've got the graphing, you know what you want them to learn by the end of the year, you feel comfortable with it, you feel like, well, duh, that wasn't so hard. Then you can add
Hmm.
another subject. Don't try to
Hmm.
jump in and do it all.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
now, if you don't have a program, then you can look at it in there and you're comfortable, you can build it. But
Hmm.
if you have one, I wouldn't drop the whole thing. But I would
Right.
take one subject where your child is struggling the most and hates it the most and say, okay, we got to change things for this subject
That's
and
right.
invite that. Will that help your attitude? If I had used this program for these three areas, but I'm not going to use it for this one that you really don't like, and we do something else, will that help our attitude?
Yeah, that's
Ask
wonderful.
them.
Yeah, Kimberly says that they spent so much emphasis on so much on an advanced math curriculum this year with a tutoring option, and their son hated it. And then his dad finally set it on the shelf until next year. So sometimes there may be, if you can speak to this a little, maybe maturation issues that parents may be dealing with. Maybe a child's just not ready for certain level of math or reading or something, but so it doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that they're failing and not going to learn. You may just need to shift. Would you agree?
I would. Yeah,
Hmm.
because we get this sequence in the high school math. It's algebra one, then it's geometry, then it's algebra two. Well, who
Right.
said?
Yeah.
Why can't it be geometry first and then algebra
Mm.
one and algebra two? Why?
Yeah.
And we get all of this hung up on all of these things. No.
Yeah.
And the idea of setting it on the shelf for the future sounds wonderful. It
That is
may
a good
be just
idea.
perfect in the future.
Exactly. Yeah, and one of the things that I lament all the time is that we embrace instructional freedom and freedom all the way up until the children until they get to high school, and then all of a sudden we start educating again. We start following scripts, and we start following traditional models because they're building a transcript at that point. And this is the document for high schoolers that's very important. It opens doors to jobs, obviously to college, even the good student discount, for insurance companies, they want to see a
Sure.
student's transcript. So I think that's another reason why, some parents of older students struggle with this notion. This is how they prefer to do it this way. They prefer to have freedom to involve their child, but now they're building a transcript. So what would be your encouragement to them, regarding that idea?
I, um, I have talked with the person at Grand Canyon University who is the homeschool liaison across the country
Mm-hmm.
for
Oh.
homeschool families, and just talking with her, and what do you see the best in the high school? And she really sees the cafeteria approach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get our math here. We're going to get
Mm.
our English and here. We're going to get our history here. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
get our art here,
Mm-hmm.
and put it together and build it based around what you can see. I would
Mm-hmm.
I would not, um, if you've heard in town that there is just an amazing band instructor at the public school, let them go there and take
Mm-hmm.
band for an hour a day. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
don't close the doors to other options, and
Right.
just see what um, where they can best meet their needs.
Right.
And by doing that, we're finding so many homeschool families having the kids as the juniors and seniors taking college courses.
That's
And
right. Yeah,
yes, it's just wonderful.
it is.
And and then just say something else about the time for
Mm-hmm.
homeschool families. In the same survey of 3,000 teachers, I asked what percent of the year do you spend teaching kids content they should already know?
Mm.
It's 1/3 of the year.
Mm-hmm.
One
Good
third.
question.
So
Mm-hmm.
why don't they know it? Is
Right.
because there's that test on Friday, and
Yes,
they cram for the Friday test, and then they know I don't need to know this anymore.
exactly. Right.
My dermatologist told me that's how you get through medical school: cram, forget, cram, forget.
Mm-hmm.
I said, really? I'm in the office. Really? She said, yeah. I said, well, when do you learn? She
Right.
said,
Right.
well, you learn in residency. That's what residency is for.
As you're practicing, probably. Yeah,
Yes, right.
Bobby said that's what my oldest does. She takes bands at our local high school, college classes online, and then homeschooled with other subjects. So that's wonderful. Lisa says, I want our homeschool to be completely child-led learning and a lot of fun. However, I feel so much pressure to force things that they aren't interested in because of the New York State required subjects and paperwork we have to submit. So that brings me to a good point. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing that up. One of the things, one of the other constraints, restrictions, barriers that parents have to deal with, depending on the state they're in, are
Sure.
state mandates, right? Right. So they're making different requirements for things. I talked to a parent from New York, and she read something that said, 30 minutes a day of health, PE, and safety is required. And she had all these other things, she wanted to build into the curriculum, but she felt forced to do that. Can you talk about that? Working with those, necessary evils, if you will, in homeschool, those state regulations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Um, it's planning it out with the kid. Okay, here's what the state says we have to do. We have to
Mm-hmm.
do this for 30 minutes a day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's look at what's the health we need to know at people your age. What
Mm-hmm.
do they need to know? And then we've got fitness. Okay, so what are we
Mm-hmm.
going to do? Plan it out. I
Right.
think that the parent has got the whole burden on themselves. And
Right.
if there are kids at that age, now at all ages, there's these things that they require you to learn,
Right.
and uh, and it's nonsense in many respects because the kids see there's a difference between teaching it and learning it,
Absolutely.
and so you put it in the state requirements. The public school teachers teach it.
Right.
That doesn't mean they learned it.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we need to distinguish and say, okay, they say 30 minutes a day of teaching. Um, we're going to talk about what we want you to learn.
Mm.
Where I am in Scottsdale, Arizona, there's the group that wants kids that all across the country. You have to pass the test on the U.S. Constitution in order to graduate from high school.
Right. Right.
There's a false assumption. The kids say, "Oh, brother, I got one more thing to cram for. Okay,
That's right.
I want to
That's right.
graduate. I'll play the game. I'll memorize this and forget it. Do one more thing."
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to meet them, but don't think about the teaching. Think about the learning.
Yes.
What do we want to learn while we meet this requirement?
Yeah, that's really important. I think that's really helpful for our homeschool families, because one of the things that the states don't mandate is how you have to do it. Kimberly says so true. There's a big difference between just teaching and actual learning, and that's absolutely right. So, what you're suggesting then for our parents who are listening is you can still, comply with your state homeschool law, but also still embrace freedom that you have and teach it in the way that will be accepted by your students. They'll buy in, they'll learn, they'll enjoy it. They don't mandate that, so you still have control and freedom over that. So I think that's really very, very helpful.
Well, and just
Um,
thinking about health and following interest, what about if the child has a relative who's suffering from a certain illness?
mm,
Okay, and say, well, I love my uncle, whatever, and they just study it in depth to find. I mean, they're interested in that, and they are studying health.
and it's helpful. Your book is filled with many really very thought-provoking quotes, of some of yours as well as from others. For example, one of them on page 87 is, learning can be defined as the process of developing sufficient surface knowledge to then move to deeper understanding such that one can appropriately transfer this learning to new tasks and situations. You attribute that to Douglas Fisher, Nancy Fry, and John Hattie. And recently, I came across another quote attributed to Charlotte Mason, the British educator. And she says, education is an atmosphere, a discipline, a life. And this seems to be your perspective as well, based on some of the things that you're
Yes.
saying. So, what do you think? Your idea of, okay, so you have to fulfill this health requirement. We can apply this in a way that's organic and natural for something that's going on in our home. It may, who knows, it may inform a career choice or a choice of major. What are some of the other benefits, do you think, of your way of thinking? It's really a paradigm shift, I think. The way that we think about how to educate children, and what are the long-term benefits of that? We're nearing the end. I want to make sure that we get your thoughts about that.
Okay, let's go to the health, and what you quoted was surface, deep, and transfer learning.
That's right.
Okay. So surface, uncle has this disease. We're going to learn a lot, all the information we can about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, then there's deep. That means we have to apply it some way. We have to say, well, what could we do from what we've learned?
Mm-hmm.
And then we transfer, and transfer is, well, could I transfer this to one of my uncle's friends?
Mm-hmm.
Transfer it beyond. Okay. So think about that. So what's the benefit? It's really what we talked about. A perfect school is that love of learning is maintained.
That's right.
I want the parents to say, I can't, here's my problem. I can't keep up with all my children want to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the problem I want for classroom teachers.
Sure.
They want to say to the principal, I don't need to go to this meeting. I'm trying to keep up with all these kids want to learn. They're putting pressure on me to learn, to teach more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what we
Mm-hmm.
want. And when they're enthused, they will do exactly that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's wonderful. I think, some parents might disagree with this, but I think a lot of children really want to please their parents. It may not look like that on the surface, but I think if we interact with them in a way that's respectful, that honors their preferences and choices, well, obviously within appropriate limits, I think that they want to please us in the learning. They want to learn. It's really a wonderful thing that can build so many things in the family relationship. It can build that bonding
Yes.
between parent and child. I think it's something that has implications outside of the academic, outside of the classroom, and into your relationship long term. I think that could be very, very helpful, very lovely thing to add to the family dynamic.
Yes. And just adding to the family dynamic, not only do we track how children are doing, we add up the total for the family to see how the family's doing.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And
Even
so
you
there you
include
go. You
dad
see,
in that, I
we're a
remember.
family
Yeah.
team. We're working together to help each other, and we get to add it up.
Yeah.
And
You
so
build this
now
sense of
Kelly's family,
identity.
with the kindergartner, she's now going to add to the family total.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One of
So,
the things that we see, I'm sorry, please
oh, no, go
continue.
ahead. You're right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that we see with homeschoolers, they go off, they go off to jobs, military, they go to college, some do gap year, entrepreneur, the trades, they do a number of things. And obviously there's individual life circumstances that may affect this, but one of the
Sure.
things I think that characterizes home school children is a sense of themselves. They really, that sense of identity, who they are, I think they really have that. And I think that comes from even Kimberly said, yes, they feel heard when we honor what is important to them. It gives them a sense you have a I can read, that reading is doable, that I can do.
Mhm.
They have a sense of things that they're capable of, and if it's something that they struggle with, it's not something that defines them. You try to find a way for them to learn it, that honors their need to learn the skill, but also that doesn't penalize them for having difficulty in an area. And I
Yeah.
think that's
And
also very helpful.
you've done so well, Carla, describing it because you're there in the world full time,
Yeah, right. Yes,
and yes, you know what they're facing. And
right.
um, we can do better. Will it
Yeah,
be perfect? No. But if you
yeah.
look at the will and thrill chart that's in the book,
Hmm, hmm,
um, there's will. There's a scale of will. I'm not doing anything to well, I'm all in. Then
hmm.
on the thrill, I hate it all the way to I love it.
Right,
Well, kids say I'm all in and I love it. So that would be perfect. Well, they're not there every time, but you want to
right.
be close to that and let the
Exactly.
kids know we're working towards that, that you're
Hmm.
working hard and you're loving it. Now you might say like this week, and I'm 75% effort, but you know where we're that we want. And then for life, that's what I
Yeah.
want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that you say is that, you state the climax for how to create a perfect homeschool is the chapter on the Bible. Can you tell us why you believe Bible instruction is important to education? I think sometimes people question whether or not they should add that to their curriculum because some have the idea that the child will see it like other curriculum, like, okay, once I've graduated, right? I don't have to do this math again, and I don't have to do Bible again. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, if they see their parents looking at the Bible, of course they know that's not true. Okay. If they don't, then they might have that attitude that it's a subject and when it's done, it's over. I like what's in to integrate it. What's in the very end of this appendix is what you as a spider web,
Mhm,
and in the center you put an interest of the child,
mhm,
and then all the subjects are there, including Bible.
mhm,
Okay,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it's if they're interested in architecture. Okay, well, they were building things in the Bible times. It's all there. Okay,
Right, right.
but if even for families who are not not attending church, they don't think of themselves as a following
As
Christ.
religious or something, yeah.
Right.
Mhm,
It is our culture. There's all of those things that our culture is built on. Um,
mhm,
just things like a scapegoat. You hear that word, the
mhm.
scapegoat. Well, the
Right,
scapegoat was there in Moses, time of Moses. Okay,
exactly, right.
so it's important for them to have that understanding and
Mhm,
look at it.
mhm.
Don't you don't to read all the way through it when you're between kindergarten and 12th grade? No, but there's
Right,
a
right.
lot in there to study.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I have a book coming out to help people in homeschool. It's how to create Bible experts, and it's
Oh,
about two
wonderful.
thirds done. Will be done in a year, and it's written for
Wonderful.
exactly for the homeschool parents and the Bible teachers in Christian schools. That's the market
That's
for it.
wonderful. That's wonderful. So Bobby says we teach how to read using scripture. So that's a really wonderful thing to do. Everyone clearly has already has a copy, and reading together can be fun. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and it has a deeper meaning, for life, right? I think that's really very very helpful. Before we end today, we're near the end of our time. Unfortunately, I could go on and on. I wish that I'd had this book when I was homeschooling my two sons. They're in their 20s out. We did land on some of those things, but I think that it would have been really helpful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the people who have joined us today? Just a takeaway that you really want to make sure that you leave them with before we end today.
I think it goes back to skill, will, and thrill. It's
Okay.
all three of those. Don't compromise on them.
Okay.
And that is so important. There's books that we talked about Bible earlier. I have some early readers for children at 4, 5, 6 years old that are based on Bible. And it's because Bill Martin Jr., who wrote Brown Bear, Brown Bear, and Chicka Chicka Boom Boom was a very good friend of mine, and he influenced my life greatly. And I just read to some kids in a Christian school recently the Jonah book, and the part they love the most is Jonah, Jonah, Jonah. What do you smell? He said, "I smell me. I stink. The whale is vomiting me up." So I tell you that because think about that. I want the kids to read it. It's the Brown Bear influence. Jonah, Jonah, Jonah. What do you smell? Okay. And I want them to. I want the skill.
Right.
I want them to read it over and over and over because it's fun to make the sound of a whale throwing up. But so they have the will to read it again and the thrill comes from it. It's all everything we do. That's just one example. It's all there.
Exactly.
And so those books, which are either based on Bible or Aesop, have skill, will, and thrill at the foundation. And Bill Martin Jr. did the same. Everything he did was to love the learning. He said the most important thing is for kids to know they can make a go of reading. If they don't love it, they won't. So he was there. He embodies skill, will, and thrill, and that's what I want to do with my career and the time I have.
Yeah, well, I think that you've done a wonderful service to the homeschool community. I think that we've been blessed to have you with us today. I'm really grateful for this time that we've had. I look forward to some of the other things that you have coming. It sounds like things are really exciting. Kimberly says, "Thank you for this informative and inspiring visit with Lee Jenkins." So unless you have anything else, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We encourage you to check out our free webinar on tips for more efficient homeschooling. We're going to drop a lot of these things in the comment section. You can find a link to Dr. Jenkins' book there, and also his resources are at www.l2j.net/about. Correct. And then if you have any specific questions or need advice or encouragement, you can reach out to our educational consultant team at HSLDA, which includes early years, special needs, and high school specialists. We are available through membership, and it would be our privilege to come alongside your homeschool journey at www.hslda.org/join. So thank you again for joining us here today, and we hope you all have a great day. Hope you're inspired and you look for more from Dr. Jenkins. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carla. It's been a joy. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.